Hey, I thought I'd do a quick video to show you how to sew up a seam on a stuffed animal. This is my pretend stuffed animal. No stuffed animals have been hurt in the process of this video. So I have my thread here. I've got a massive knot in it, and my ring is backwards. I have a big knot. I'm using red just so you can see it better. Normally I would use a color that works with the fabric and doesn't contrast so much. So real quick, I'm going to go in. I've got my needle. I'm going to go in and I'm going to come out a little bit further. This is the edge of the hole right here where my tip of my finger is, but I'm going to come out a little bit further out. See, that way I'm past the weak spot. All right, I'm going to flip it over just because I'm right-handed and I like to go this way. So the ladder stitch is what we're going to use, and I'm going to, I'm just going to do a couple little stitches here just to get to where I can show you better. Ladder stitch, you're going from one side to the other and you're going parallel to the edge that's open. And you always want to make sure you're pulling such that both strands of thread are always going taut. Sometimes you'll get like a little loop, and that if you don't catch it right away, it's kind of annoying. Okay, so here I'm at the beginning of the hole. See this thread? That was the thread that held the seam together initially. So my thread is coming out of this bottom side right here. I'm going to go directly across from where it is. See how I am literally on the other piece right in line with this one. And I'm going to take a little bite and I'm going to come out parallel to this edge. Coming out. And make sure you pull all the way in. Yeah, see that it wanted to stay out. And then I'm going to come, so now I'm in the top part of the fur. I'm going to come across and I'm going to dive in right below where the stitch came out, right here. And I'm going to come up and I'm going to try and keep my needle popping up the same distance from the edge every time. And see, look at sometimes when you have doubled thread, it likes to get cranky. So let's do that. Sorry it's so super close up, but it works better. Okay. So see how I have this red spot right here showing? That's the stitch I just did. This is why it's called ladder stitch. Here, watch. I'm going directly across into the opposite piece I just came out of. So here I'm going in, and I am going in. This is a big, thick stuffed animal fur. I'm taking big stitches. It's okay. If it were thinner, smaller fabric, I would take smaller stitches. Now, when I pull this straight, let's see here, and I go back, these look like the rungs of a ladder. See how that's why it's called the ladder stitch. So right now I'm leaving it loose so you can see it, but you would normally want to just tighten it as you go, and you can barely see. You can't see any red. So, all right, so my thread is coming out of this top section, and I'm going to dive in, and here I'll show you how far I know to dive in. When you have a seam like this, and this goes for pretty much anything that has a seam, it can be a shirt or a pair of shorts, whatever. If I tug gently on both ends of this fabric and I just tuck in, it lines up right where it wants to be. So then I'm going to just gently hold it here with my thumb. And all right, so it came out right here on the top section. I'm going to dive in the bottom, and you got to make sure you're hitting fabric and not just catching fur. I'm going to go in and I'm going to go parallel to the opening again, taking a little chunk and pull. And I'm slowly, see how we have another, I'll loosen it a little bit. See how we have another rung of our ladder? And then you tighten it up gently. And what happens is you get this invisible seaming. So you can't even tell that was open. See, I can see this thread here. That's where the opening started. And sometimes you got to pull out the fur. It gets caught in that seam. And if I pull too tight, it starts to like wrinkle up. So you have to constantly pay attention to your seam. Okay, I'm just going to do a couple quick stitches here. See if I can close this up in a decent amount of time. And unfortunately the fur does tend to catch on the thread and make it harder to do. But I'm just continually going in, and my stitches are at about the same distance down here, like from the edge of the fabric, as they are on the other side. That way you get a nice even seam. See how that's nice and even compared to the seam below it? So you can't tell that I've done a repair. And you can barely tell that this is here because the hole's only this big now. So I'm coming out of the bottom, I'm going to go in the top. I'm going to take my stitch, and because there is a seam allowance, and I'll show you the back just because I can, there is a seam allowance here, right here. It's sort of a big one. My stitches are going into this edge, the fold where the seam allowances meet, or like where the edges meet. It's going into that fold. And sometimes you might have to pull out some fur to let the stitch go all the way down. All right, I think I just need 1 or 2 more stitches. And don't forget, this is a stuffed animal. If you see a stitch, really not that big a deal. All right, now I'm going to go up here. And what I'm going to do, like I did at the beginning, I'm going to go a little bit past where the edge of the hole was. See this thread here? Right there? That was my original seam, the thread for my original seam. And see, look, here's some fur that's tucked in. I'm just going to pull it out with my needle. Okay, I'm going to do it again. I was in the top, now I'm going down to the bottom. And there will be an illustration about this ladder stitch also. So I've gone past the end of the hole. Now here's the a little bit trickier part. If you have an opening available, like I do, just because this is, pretend stuffed animal, go in where you normally would, but don't pull it out on the front. Leave it in the back and do a securing stitch back here. But because I'm in the front and I don't have any access to the inside of this baby, I'm going to pretend this is like all full too. What I'm going to do is I'm going to take a teensy beensy stitch right where the thread came out. I'm going to take a tiny stitch so that this ends up right next to the thread that was coming out. Let's see if we can untangle this mess. All right, see, double thread likes to do that. And so don't pull all the way. You're going to leave a little loop. See that loop? I'm going to dive through it. And I'm going to pull tight, gently. We want that knot to go all the way down to the edge, or like under the fur. We don't want it resting in the fur. So do you see how I have it there? I'm going to tighten it all the way down. And I'm going to do one more. And I hear little footsteps. I'm going to pull it in. Yes, hold on. And it's okay. So I'm going to pull this up. See, I've got to back it out a little bit and try again. Or not. Sometimes this happens with fur. Fur gets into the knot and makes it nearly impossible to work with. Okay, so I've got it loosened up. Let's try this again. No, the fur is still getting in there. All right, so I'm going to pull. And I'm going to keep going. Try not to, break your thread. Okay, I did my 2 stitches. Can't really see. What I like to do with stuffed animals is I like to dive in with my needle. After I've done my 2 securing stitches, 2 or 3, whatever you feel comfortable with, dive in and come up an inch or 2 away. See how I'm coming up over here? Now I've buried that thread in the stuffing. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to pull a little tight, and I'm going to cut, and then that thread is going to get sucked inside and now it's invisible. So that is an invisible stitch, the ladder stitch. And you might want to come back with your needle and just untuck fur. Just give it a little rub. You can pull out the thread that was there before because you've secured it past. Just trim a little bit. Don't, pull it out and keep going, because then you'll undo everything down here. But if there's a little bit sticking out, feel free to trim. Okay, with better scissors than what I have. These are my Phillips Fail scissors. Okay, you get the point. All right, now look at that invisible seam on my pretend stuffed animal. It's just a piece of fabric. All right, thanks for watching.